Penny's sentiments for coming and covering this campaign. I know that a lot's happening. We've got just a couple of weeks left before Texas Independence Day. This campaign from the very beginning has been about that, restoring a sovereign state here, understanding that private property ownership is an essential element of freedom, and fighting against that thing lots of Texans are asking about. What is it exactly that caused our governor to want to give away thousands of acres of Texas land? Private property has long been held as a principal, essential element of freedom in this state. We need to respect it. We've talked about gun ownership. We've talked about restoring state sovereignty, a proper balance between a limited federal government and a sovereign state. And we've talked about addressing illegal immigration, securing the Texas border, and providing for a healthy immigration process in this state. Those are the issues facing this campaign. The political games that we saw beginning to be played yesterday serve as nothing but a diversion. I think many around Texas have seen that. We're going to continue to forge forward talking about the real issues facing Texas, and I'm happy to take your questions at this time. Thank you again.
Didn't you contribute to these political games, as you call them, by not answering this question?
Well, I think that you get into those interviews sometimes and maybe overguess or revise what's going on. I heard a question that was probably bigger than what was really being asked. I heard the should people be questioning their government, and I've said repeatedly, yes, we ought to be holding ourselves to transparency and scrutiny in government. The fact that so many people have questions about so much of what's going on in government, I think, is the real underlying issue there. That's what I was addressing, championing people's right and ability to ask. I think I've come out, to clarify. Do I believe Muslim terrorists flew planes into buildings? Yes, I do. Do I believe that our government orchestrated or coordinated that? No, I don't. Maybe that's what he was looking for, and I just jumped the gun a bit there.
Why did you say that in the first place?
I just said I was in the mindset of Glenn Beck being someone who questions what's going on in government, and that's what I was responding to.
I asked you several times.
Very good questions. What are questions that are unanswered about the attack on the World Trade Center?
I haven't studied a whole lot of that. I know that there are people out there, and we've seen lots of, I think, Americans raising questions about all sorts of things within government. We've just had some really interesting things happen with the global warming stuff. I think there have been conservatives for years who've...
In relation to the 9/11 attacks, you said that there have been some very good questions raised in that regard. What were you talking about? What good questions?
I've seen some information about how come, I think, and I may be wrong because this is 8 or 9 years ago now, but if I believe correctly, I think we didn't have any loss of life of police officers from New York City, but we had a number of lives lost that were firefighters. And how come the police officers got out but the firefighters didn't get out? Questions about cleanup. I know that there are questions out there. As I said yesterday, that's not something anybody has ever really questioned me about. It's not something I've delved deeply into, but I am aware enough of society to know that there are people who have questions, and I think that they're good questions.
Questions specifically about whether the government was involved in that attack?
Yeah, and that's not the question I heard. No, I don't know about that.
Mr. Albaugh yesterday said anybody that believes the U.S. government was involved in that attack is, quote, nuts. That kind of discussion is nuts. Do you think that's nuts?
I think that we have to be careful in government. I think conservatives frequently talk about this thing of individual liberty, and then as soon as someone raises a question that's maybe outside of the mainstream, we want to categorize. I want to be careful as a leader not to call fellow citizens nuts. I want to be careful as a leader to recognize that dissension and minority questions can be asked. I'd like to not categorize individuals in that way and champion their ability to raise and ask, and yours, to raise and ask the tough and hard questions without making characterizations such as that. I respectfully reserve the right to agree or disagree with those sorts of things, but I really want to stay away from, and as I think as Penny indicated, take the high road here and say people ought to be asking questions. It's right and proper to do that, and not start throwing labels at those who do.
Does this hurt your campaign? Noticeably hurt your campaign?
Boy, we've been so focused. I can't tell that it has at this juncture, but I also haven't had a lot of time to assess and reassess. I'm a clinician, and I made the comment yesterday that I feel a little bit like I've been in a cardiac arrest code in a hospital situation. There's many members of the medical team that respond in those sorts of situations. We've all got a very precise job to do. We've got a great team around us here. They've been handling a lot of that fallout. I'm focusing on running a race, governing and staying on the issues that are affecting Texas.
In addition to your comments yesterday on the Glenn Beck program, do you think you contributed to the perception that you are a 9/11 truther by going on Alex Jones' radio show, given that he's a well-known 9/11 truther?
You know, I think there's lots of associations that people can draw all kinds of conclusions for. Clearly, there's a big audience in Texas, and I think, rejected very, very few invitations to speak. I've made this a of the people, by the people, for the people campaign, and haven't spent, frankly, a whole lot of time investigating or researching backgrounds of people that I'm talking to. I only know Alex for maybe the last year. I'm not someone who has followed him closely. Do I realize that he is outside of the mainstream? Yes, he has a huge listening audience. I think we clearly articulated our message to that audience, and have been grateful for the number of Texans that have stood shoulder to shoulder with us in this campaign. Comfortable enough in who I am and what I believe to say, if you believe like we do on these issues, I hope you'll vote for this campaign, support this government of the people, by the people. We're going to call for transparency. We're going to restore a constitutional republic, and that's what people have done.
Was Glenn Beck setting you up? Do you think that was attractive?
Boy, it sure felt ugly. And I, you know, as Penny said, we really are going to take the high road here and try not to get pulled into the political royal game. I think that's a big part of why I'm in this race. We feel like we've got this. I think many Texans feel like we have a royal class in America called politicians and elected officials, and they are not serving the people. There's lots of questions. I'd like to talk about the questions here in Texas. You know, the bank bailout deals and the money coming from other interests, and who's giving away our land and why are we giving away our land, things that just don't sit right with Texans. Those are the real interests in this campaign and the real issues in this campaign.
It's admittedly somewhat circular, but why are you still talking about this?
Because there's still questions being asked, and want to get here today and wrap it up.
So to ask Phil's question a different way, does this somehow help you?
Well, certainly I guess there's that old adage out there, you know, all publicity is good publicity. There are a lot of calls coming in. I understand I've got 2 people handling media requests and calls, and lots coming in. We'll take it as it comes and attempt to stay on message here, make sure that people understand. As we've said from the beginning of the campaign, Texas has a real opportunity to show the country a different way, to show the country freedom and prosperity, and to really step up and lead in a direction that's